there, I'm Dr. Brinkley. I am coming to you from my office at Revolutions Naturopathic in Folsom, California. And today we are going to talk about the importance of women's hormones. So let's get started. All right. So I have a rather large practice that does consist mostly of women. And I do help them through menopause and other menstrual issues. So I see a lot of women with PCOS. I see a lot of women with dysmenorrhea, which is painful periods. I see a lot of women who are struggling with infertility, fibroids, you name it. And it does, a lot of those issues, a lot of them do just boil down to balancing the hormones in various ways. So here are the major hormones that can contribute most famously to issues in menopause. And, many of you may have already seen this graphic, the 7 menopausal dwarfs. But let me tell you, in clinical practice, they are real. And women get to experience being each of them. So the major hormones that I like to look at are cortisol, DHEA, aldosterone, estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, and of course, thyroid hormone. Now, the first one we talked about in the previous slide was cortisol, and that definitely has quite a bit to do with stress response. Increases in cortisol are famously highlighted on those late night infomercials for increase in belly fat. It's certainly not all that they do. It increases your insulin to lower your blood glucose. It's the main hormone that gets triggered in fight or flight response, in addition to epinephrine and norepinephrine. So when we keep having that fight or flight response for whatever reason, coronavirus news, fighting with your family, stressful job, being stuck in your office all day with no chance to escape, whatever. The receptors become less and less sensitive to insulin. And this contributes to that belly fat because your insulin levels have to go higher and higher to get a response. And, you start to store carbs super fast if you don't exercise when cortisol is high. And this is partially why there is some success with low carb diets when cortisol is elevated. So other effects of cortisol imbalance, these are more the hidden or less obvious effects, things like bone loss, breaking down muscle tissue. You can have anxiety, you can have fatigue, you've got a craving for sweets, you have low libido. And that sounds a heck of a whole lot like some other hormonal imbalance symptoms. So let's talk about those. So estrogen deficiency most famously happens in menopause, but it can happen for premenopausal women at different points in their menstrual cycle and contribute to hot flashes, especially right before your period. So you can have sleep disturbances, dry skin as well, foggy thinking, heart palpitations. It can contribute to painful intercourse. You can have low libido. You can get headaches. You can have memory issues. You can get really fun yeast infections, not so fun, depression, and bone loss as well. But if we have estrogen that's too high, as can happen in different points of the menstrual cycle or right before menopause. You can have it happen at points during menopause, or certainly if you're being over supplemented with estrogen, with hormone replacement therapy. If you're given too much, you can get things like water retention, you can get breast swelling and tenderness, you can have that insatiable craving for sweets, you can have lumpy, bumpy, fibrocystic breasts, uterine fibroids, which can contribute to heavy bleeding, absolutely, nervousness, anxiety, heavy menses, being tired. This can also contribute to weight gain. You can have mood swings, you can have low thyroid, symptoms of low thyroid. So this can sometimes mimic a low thyroid picture. You can also be deficient in progesterone, both, during menopause and at different points in the menstrual cycle, or just that can be just your default as a person. You can have more swollen breasts due to progesterone deficiency. You can have more headaches, more anxiety. It can cause irregular menses. You can have more cramping when you do have a menstrual cycle. Certainly it can contribute to infertility, although it's usually you have low progesterone secondary to not ovulating. You can have more acne. You can have more weight gain, low libido, mood swings, depression, PMS, fuzzy thinking, joint pain, a lot of the things that you can also have with estrogen excess. Now, the reason for this is because there isn't an absolute scale where, you know, you can, sometimes estrogen excess and progesterone deficiency are very similar because it's the same thing relative to each other, if that makes sense. You know, so this is definitely something to suss out here with an experienced clinician. You can go the other way and have too much progesterone. Usually I see this accomplished through hormone replacement. Usually this sometimes will happen that way. Sometimes, very rarely have I seen it clinically, but it can happen. You know, you can be just more tired. You can have mild depression. You can have more of those vaginal yeast infections. You can get more bloating, breast swelling. Looks like estrogen deficiency a lot. Testosterone imbalance. You can have issues with libido. You can have memory issues, palpitations, bone health, vaginal dryness, depression, aches and pains. Kind of the same things we've been talking about, but can be due to testosterone. So the treatment for these is, of course, you know, testing can be very helpful in determining what might be out of balance and rebalancing them. And that's where an experienced clinician like myself or another naturopathic doctor or functional medicine doctor who's experienced with hormone replacement or with hormone balancing will come in and really a thorough intake, exam, hormone testing. There's various ways that we can accomplish that hormone testing. And then what usually happens is I'm collaborating with a patient to create an individualized treatment plan, and that can include dietary changes, lifestyle modification, nutraceutical supplements, so amino acids, minerals and vitamins, herbal formulations, bioidentical hormones, and then more testing if necessary to achieve alleviation of those symptoms. Now, there's some things though, you know, you might be viewing this at home and wondering, well, what can I do to get started even if I don't want to come in? So one of the safest and often underused treatments for hormone balancing is increasing fiber in the diet. So fiber is pretty amazing for hormone balancing, and then, you know, just for keeping your GI tract healthy in general. It helps move food more quickly through your gut, and then it also helps to regulate blood sugar, and that can be important, especially if you're in that cortisol imbalance state that we talked about at the very beginning of this presentation. It, of course, lowers your cholesterol by increasing elimination and binding to it. It can also help get mercury out of the system in a mild and safe way, and then it does feed the good bacteria in your large intestine, which has good long-term effects, but it also will help to process those hormones. And so the best forms of fiber for your hormonal health are more vegetables, more beans, and whole grains or complex carbs. More cruciferous vegetables like spinach, kale, broccoli, cabbage help balance estrogen in the system. Most Americans are super, super deficient and only get about 8 grams of fiber from their diet per day. And really, we should be eating closer to probably 25 or 30 grams a day, which is a significant increase. And those parts of the world that do achieve that do have less colon cancer. So, you know, this is just kind of a quick reference because, you know, not everybody knows about fiber or the relative amounts of fiber, but Google can be your friend here. You know, this just talks about the different amounts of fibers for folks, for fruit, vegetables, nuts and beans. There's a surprisingly high amount of fiber in peas as well, and beans. Those tend to be the biggest kind of bang for your buck, cup for cup, ounce for ounce wise. If you can tolerate beans, You know, whatever form of fiber that you can tolerate is usually an improvement over a low fiber diet. And then, of course, grains and cereals do contain high amounts of fiber and can be added as well. But usually I like to stress a little bit more the vegetables and fruits and beans. And then it's important, of course, to have regular meal times and not skip meals or go longer than 6 hours between meals, because if you do, if you're someone who's already in a cortisol imbalance state, skipping meals can really mess with your cortisol levels, and prolonged high cortisol levels can lead to adrenal fatigue. There's a lot of benefit that can be gained from intermittent fasting, absolutely, and I do use that sometimes in my practice, but not if we're in this cortisol imbalance state. Usually we need to fix this first. And then that's pretty much the end of what I have to say today, but if you are curious and want to know more or want to set up a visit, we do offer free 15-minute visits to get started. Right now, we're in the middle of the COVID-19 pandemic and are focusing more on telemedicine visits, but we are doing quite a lot of those throughout the state of California. And that is all I have for today. Have a good day.